Hi, friends. Today we're going to expand our narrative nonfiction knowledge to really looking for some more detailed clues that the author might leave us throughout a nonfiction text that's written in a narrative format. So, you know from yesterday that if it's a narrative nonfiction, it's going to look pretty different from an expository nonfiction. And because of that, we're going to have to rev up our minds differently. So, we're going to be thinking similarly to how we would for a fiction story, but we're going to apply that to a narrative nonfiction, also knowing that facts are going to be embedded along the way. Something else that we can do is look for little breadcrumbs, as our reading teacher calls them. Typically, when we pick up a narrative nonfiction about an event in history or about a person, we know how it's going to end up. So, since we already know the ending, which we don't always know the ending of narrative fiction, but since we already know the ending, we can look for ways that our main character acts, things that they say, or thoughts that they have that can kind of lead us to the end goal, that can kind of lead us to that ending that we already know happens. Let's listen a little bit more to get a better understanding of this.
Have you noticed that when you read your biography, there are tons of facts coming at you all at once? So and so had three brothers and two sisters. So and so was born in 1972 in Cleveland, Ohio. So and so went to Acorn Nursery School and Big Oak Elementary School. And it's hard to hold on to all that stuff, isn't it? What should you flag with your Post-its and what could you skip? Today I want to teach you that when readers read a true story about a person or an event in history, they usually know from the very start why that person or event is famous. They already know the end of the story. And this can clue readers into details that will turn out to be really important to hold on to because it relates to the climactic ending about why that person or event is so important. Take our article on Ezra Jack Keats. We already know that he's an award-winning author and illustrator. That's what he's famous for. Now we can think, is there a second theme that runs through that story? And we noticed yesterday how often his dad was mentioned. His dad saying, you're not going to make a living as a starving artist. So we could say that Ezra wanted to be both an artist and someone his father approved of. In other words, readers, remember that when you summarize your narrative nonfiction, you need to be able to find the main storyline, the way the story holds together, and it helps to think about what your subject really wants. Think about the plot line. You already know how it's going to end. So use what you know about how your subject, your person or your event is famous, and be on the lookout for details, those breadcrumbs the author's giving you along the way that will eventually end up to being really important. They're going to contribute, they're going to build to that ending. Those are the things you jot about. So try it now.
All right, third grade, we are going to practice those skills that our reading teacher just taught us, keeping in mind what we learned yesterday, which is that a narrative nonfiction is written and organized in a way that's very similar to a narrative fiction, meaning we're going to have a story with a beginning and a middle and an end, and we're going to have characters, and there's going to probably be a problem and hopefully a resolution. But the good news about the narrative nonfiction I've chosen today is we already know the ending, right? We already know why Abraham Lincoln is famous. And so we can use that to look for clues, little breadcrumbs, as our reading teacher called it, that can help us decide how Abraham Lincoln got to that final point of being famous for ending slavery and uniting the country. So we're going to look for things that have happened in his life that may maybe were obstacles that he had to overcome. We're going to look at things that show us what he wanted in life, what he valued. We're going to analyze his character just like we would with a with a fiction narrative text, looking at kind of how we would describe him and what he says and what he does and what he thinks that matches up with that. Here we go. Abe Lincoln remembers. When I was little, the cabin we lived in was small, with one room and one window. At first, I thought the sky was square like a piece of cut cloth. I could only see 2 birds in the sky and 1 squirrel in the tree. When I got bigger, Pa told me my legs were like a colt's, and he was afraid I'd fall down. They were so long and shanky. Sometimes I went to school, but I don't suppose those days would add up to much more than a year. I'd fold up my legs like an umbrella and sit quiet at the back of the schoolroom, gulping down learning like water. But Pa wouldn't allow me much schooling, making me chop wood, build fences, plant corn, and drive the horses. I see kind of one little breadcrumb the author might have left me where, let's see if it's a male or a female, where Anne describes Abraham Lincoln as gulping down learning like water, meaning he just wanted to take in as much learning as possible. That shows me that he values information, that he thinks gaining more knowledge is important. I think we'll probably see that part of Abraham Lincoln. I think we'll see that part of his character continue throughout this text. I did learn to read, though, got some history and my numbers. I'd practiced them on the back of the fire shovel. For soot and ashes make a fine slate. And I would do anything for a book. I'd read any chance I got and dreamed of freedom, of rising like a hawk into the sky to some fine high place. Oh boy, what a big clue from the author. That's just a giant piece of a breadcrumb, okay? Dreams of freedom, which is exactly what he fought for when he was talking to the American public and getting his soldiers ready for the Civil War, because that whole movement was all about him ending slavery, right? Slavery is the opposite of freedom, so he wanted to end it. And we can see he felt kind of an urging for freedom, even as maybe what I would describe him as a teenager there. It was time to move on. I left, no money in hand, no second shirt, just a handkerchief around a piece of cornbread. I worked on a flatboat and in a general store. You know, I kind of pause here and think, what kind of traits would a human have to leave with no money in hand, no job, and still be able to find his way through the world? I would say that he's determined, which makes sense. You need somebody who's determined, who's going to change the country from a slave-owning country to not a slave-owning country. When the storekeeper saw how I towered over the others, he bet I'd whip the best wrestler around, Jack Armstrong. We locked arms and bodies, swung back and forth, then he downed me with a leg throw the rules did not allow. But I shook hands with him and we became friends. Another clue from the author. When someone treated Abraham Lincoln unfairly, he did not retaliate. He did not fight back unfairly. He shook their hands. Integrity is important to him. Getting even is not. I knew that being tall is not enough to make your way in this world. I needed words for that. When I studied to become a lawyer, I practiced my cases out loud as I walked, learning how to use words like a leading rein on a colt to take people where I wanted. But when I ran for the legislature, I saw it would take a deal of tugging to persuade people that slavery was wrong. Oh my goodness, boy, do you need to know how to be a great speaker. Boy, do you want to be able to give a speech that leads people where you want. Abraham Lincoln developed those skills long before he became president. This is part of a little breadcrumb we're getting from the author, showing us that in Abraham Lincoln's narrative story about his life, becoming a lawyer, studying his cases by talking them out aloud, much like you would as a speechwriter. Those were very necessary skills that helped him become the successful president that led to the end of slavery, that united the country. Then I found Mary, who agreed to be my wife. She was bright and brave, like a flag cracking in the wind, all color and rustle, and shine. When I ran for the Senate, she told me, "You will win, and someday you will be president." How I laughed at that! But later, others thought the same, and I was nominated to run for the highest office. I talked and debated to show people we must be one nation, not part slave, not part free. When I won the presidency, we took our three sons, Tad, Willie, and Robert, to the White House. They were like balls bounding down a road, and people said they had no manners or discipline. I thought happiness was more important than manners, though I didn't like it when Ted drove his cart and goats down the White House hall. But we had need of happiness then, for the great wound opened in the country and in my chest, the war. I tried to keep North and South together until it was clear that talk could not mend this great division. The dying grieved me so that I had a joke book in my desk to keep from weeping. Another indicator of what a strong moral compass Abraham Lincoln had, that it was very upsetting to him. Even though he was against the South, all of the dying was still upsetting him. And I was terrified we would lose. I could not find good generals, and we lost as many battles as we won. But when we won the Battle of Gettysburg, it seemed the Union might prevail. When I went and saw all those graves lined up like the rails I used to split, I could hardly speak. Words could not lead me here, and I thought my speech a short, poor thing. I felt in the middle of some vast tug of war until my heart would break. And the Battle of Gettysburg speech is a very famous speech. Finally, our side has won. The country is not divided and the slaves are free. I can be glad of that, though when I look in the mirror, I see how sorrow has dug lines in my cheek. I told Mary that tonight is a time to be happy as we wait to see a play. I think again of that little house, the small window, the piece of sky with 2 birds and 1 squirrel. How much has come to pass since then? How much there is to still be done. And then I also like how the author added just some strictly nonfiction, expository nonfiction to the back, because she knew she wanted to give the facts in a narrative nonfiction in a story format, but if you wanted some bonus facts, she also included those in the back. All right, friends, I hope you were listening intently on some of those breadcrumbs that I pointed out. Some of those parts of the story where the author clues us in. Since we know the end of the story, we're allowed to kind of look for little clues about how our character got to that end. Be looking for those in your own reading as well.